Well, according to my computer, it is 5:32. So there are some disclosures I'm supposed to read, and I'm not finding that also. I can, from my memory, I can at least, I can recall that I need to remind all of us here that this is a public forum. And so, of course, we're all expected to honor that and, give a decorum that's appropriate for this kind of meeting. I would remind you, it is recording, which is good because this meeting will be recorded. So I'll remind everyone who's on the line that that's also taking place. And one of the things that I'm not quite so skilled in is, I always worry, okay, I figured out how I can, if I have to mute anyone. I just read in the paper how another meeting in the state of Connecticut was Zoom bombed. These things can be hijacked. I can't imagine.
Yeah, so school committee was Zoom bombed.
Was it?
Yeah.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll do my best to manage this. This is my first time hosting a meeting, so I appreciate everyone's patience. Does anyone else, Janet, and you in particular, having participated in a number of Zoom meetings, are there other disclosures that should be mentioned now that I'm forgetting? Or there's a statement, I think.
Yeah, the only thing that was on the agenda that was posted, it just says, please note that due to COVID-19 coronavirus outbreak and due to Governor Baker's order that town hall is closed to the public in regards to public meetings of the Southampton Housing Authority unless otherwise postponed or canceled, whatever that means. Otherwise, they will live stream Southampton Housing Authority meetings via Zoom on the internet. In-person attendance and public comment at our meeting will be suspended until further notice. So.
Yeah, there was a standard template, as I recollect.
Yeah, I have it on my Council on Aging one that I read.
Yeah. And was that pretty much it, what you just read? Or
no, it's a little more detailed than that.
Yeah. Would you mind, just so we do this, so we're within guidelines, if you could pull that up and...
Well, let me try to find it here.
Yeah. And actually, is it part of the agenda as a standard stamp now on the MyTownGov agenda? Let me jump there.
It is for, I use it on the Council on Aging for my meetings. I think I just took this one off of your email, so.
Yeah.
But I can read it if you want. I don't know. I don't know that unless you give me the power to share. I don't think.
If you don't mind reading it, I think that would be sufficient.
Okay, I think I can share. Does everybody see that?
Yep, that's cool.
That allows you to read it if you'd like.
Very good.
Looks
and
good.
I don't see any guests, but they could read it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This looks similar to, I think, what I received from our town administrator, Ed Gibson. So in the future, maybe we can get that pasted on our agenda.
Yep. We just have to remember the first time I did it, I forgot to change it from Concom to the Council on Aging. So.
Oops. Oops.
Minor things like that. So, are we good?
I think so.
Okay.
We're good with that.
Stop that. Okay.
Okay. So, I do not see any guests in this Zoom hall. If there were guests, I would, of course, and we would all welcome them and ask if they had any input prior to starting. I'm hopeful that people actually view this recording in the future. We'll see. Okay, so we'll move along. Again, just to more formally welcome Brian, who comes to us with great enthusiasm. I met with him previously, and I'm looking forward to, hi Francine, I'm looking forward to,
Nice try.
yeah, looking forward to Brian working with us and bringing us a new level of insight and differing input than what we're used to. I think
Great.
we'd love to get up to 5 members, but we're slowly getting there. Brian, maybe, I don't know if you want to say a few things about your interest in the Housing Authority and what you hope to bring, and maybe a little bit of your background, if you could, please.
Sure, gladly. Well, first, I'm just about to be 34 in a couple of days here, so happy birthday to me. I live on College Highway with my family. I have a 10-month-old son, Isaac, and an 8-month-old stepson, and my wife and I run the household. We're both mental health workers in Holyoke. I was a journalist in this Mass Live, Republican, 22 News, those outlets, for about 7 years before that. I've lived pretty much all over the Pioneer Valley, Easthampton, Northampton, Southampton, Amherst, Springfield, Holyoke, Chicopee. My family was housing insecure from when I was about 9 until roughly 13. My mother moved into a motel and gave custody to my father. And so affordable housing would have been extremely helpful to us had it been available, to folks in our particular demographic brackets and all the breakdowns that are used to determine the waiting lists and who gets housing and which housing is available. If we had maybe known a little bit more about the process, we could have gotten affordable housing, but it just didn't happen for us. And I feel like that should not be a story that is told in the Pioneer Valley. I think that we can do quite a lot better than that. So that's the perspective I bring. Affordable housing is a regional responsibility. It's not something that Southampton is supposed to be trying to do alone. It's supposed to be something that Southampton is doing as a coalition with the surrounding towns. And I think that we can be reasonably expected to do that. So I think, that the time has come.
Wow. Well, so that's some personal experience and some, the journalism background, a little bit of investigative experience, a lot of investigative experience. So welcome to our board.
Documents.
Yeah. It's great to find someone who loves documents. So
He might make a really good clerk, I'm thinking.
Hey, maybe someday. No.
He just might. Well, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
And maybe it's worthy of all of us saying a little bit something about ourselves as a means of introduction. Chuck, do you want to give a little background, if you would, please?
Yeah, I've been on the Housing Authority for a couple of years now. When I first started, we didn't have a lot of meetings. This has actually picked up over the last couple of years. But I work out of the health department in West Springfield, doing mainly housing code enforcement. Now I'm dealing more with the COVID issues and food complaints and such like that. But that's basically it in a nutshell. But I've worked with housing authorities in West Springfield where I am, but mostly the housing authority represents more of a ownership of a home or something, or responsibility for the home. But here it's a little different. Mm-hmm. More like an advisory board than anything else.
Right. That's what we've been, and we're trying to move beyond that into being proactive in developing more affordable housing in Southampton. That's our charge. But it's been a long road. Thank you. Janet, do you want to add a little bit?
Well, I'm twice Brian's age. And but I'm very involved. I'm the chair for the Council on Aging Board. So one of the reasons that kind of drove me to get involved in the Housing Authority is my concern about, as our seniors can no longer afford to be in their homes, how do we provide them the ability to stay in Southampton? So I'm here to be a pretty strong advocate for that age group, and it's I'm hoping we can make some change. That's kind of how I got involved. So I've been on it, well, it's a year and a half now because we got extended the first time, right? For my 1 year assignment. I keep signing up for the 1 year vacancies. So, but I'm on the Council on Aging, I'm on the Board of Assessors and the Housing Authority, so. I'm retired, obviously.
Yeah.
I have lots of free time. I thought I did, I don't.
You thought you did, not anymore.
Right.
And Brian, as I shared when we had coffee, you know, I work for the VA. I'm the program manager for the homeless program, and I was recruited heavily onto the Southampton Housing Authority by a previous member. She imagined that I would bring a level of expertise given my daytime job, but I'm learning how much I don't know on this side of the business. You know, I'm doing this work. So a steep learning curve for me to get up to speed. I'm also on the Housing Authority, I was also assigned to represent housing on the Master Plan Implementation Committee, which has been a lot of work, but a lot of if you took the survey that was available this summer, you saw there's a lot of housing issues in there. So there's going to be some good data that's going to come out of that that might help shape our direction. So I don't regret being on that committee at all, other than the time it's taking from me, but such it is.
And we appreciate, I'll speak for myself, that you represent this authority on that committee because it's so important, so.
It's been, you know, it's been quite an education for me. Okay, what I propose next is we move right along to recap our current status. The past minutes, as member review of past minutes, maybe before we get there, something that's not on this agenda that should be, is a specific review of our most recent May minutes, which Janet thankfully sent to all of us. Did everyone have a chance to read those?
Yeah. Looks good.
Yeah, I didn't see any errors or omissions.
Okay.
I guess, can we make a motion to approve the minutes?
I was going to say, are you making a motion, Chuck?
Yes.
Is there a second?
I can second that.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You know, can I tell you, one of the things that we're supposed to do that I learned recently in the document I sent you, Jim, is that we're supposed to have a roll call votes instead of just ayes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that was one of the things I haven't been doing in my meetings that I was like, oh, we are. Okay, so I just wanted to share that with you.
I wonder if that's a new Zoom requirement, or
Yes.
I thought that was only, okay, I thought it was just required if it wasn't unanimous. Or...
No, it's a Zoom requirement. So I'll say Kane, aye.
Kaneki, aye.
Sini, aye.
Steele abstain because I wasn't at the meeting.
Fair. Now there's a guy who's sharp and I'm paying attention. All right. Okay, I think it just passes and we can post it now. Thank you, Janet. So in reviewing the previous minutes that are posted on the website, I hope everyone's had a chance to look at those. But in high-level summary, Brian, and for all of us, I would say that our efforts over the last 1.5 to 2 years has really been around understanding where we've been and where we think we can go. And so that's been asking a lot of questions. We've met with a representative of the PVPC, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. We have met with Housing Authority member from the town of Amherst. We have invited Chris, I'm blanking on his last name now, from
Chris Lee.
Chris Lee from Tiny Homes, thank you, to present to us, you know, the viability of tiny homes and what would make that happen in Southampton. You know, is there a bylaw requirement change? etc. So we've been doing a lot of learning, I feel, not necessarily a lot of action per se. And I'm going to editorialize a little bit here, and this is where I want Janet and Chuck to like either contradict me or concur or something in between. But I've been a little bit frustrated by what I've been learning, because what I'm learning is that the towns that do this successfully, that increase their affordable housing units, are generally the larger towns that have paid housing authority staff. And the small towns, like ours, and even smaller, some of the hill towns, it doesn't really budge. There are some notable exceptions that we've looked at. The town of Goshen successfully created some affordable units. The town of Easthampton did a private, I learned, senior housing development that had some affordable units. But town efforts themselves have been, it's challenging because there's a lot to, when we talked, Janet and I met with a gentleman from Amherst, there's a lot to follow and trace. It's kind of complex. Not necessarily the work of a volunteer board. But that's my opinion. Go ahead.
And just one thing that I also noted is that there's consortiums that support like the Easthampton or the Goshen or even the Amherst, but Southampton seem to fall between the cracks. We're not part of the Hilltown one. We're not part of the one that covers Easthampton, Northampton, I forget the name of it, and Amherst. So we're kind of like in no man's land, sort of, when it comes to that kind of support. So that's been a little frustrating.
Thank you for reminding. Yes, that's true, that these towns have recognized the need to kind of collaborate in a joint effort because it can be big, and we're not in those collaborations. At least not yet. However, not all hope is lost. Again, I'm editorializing. One of the things we did learn is that, we can work with, for example, collaborate with our local planning board to work on bylaw changes as far as town districting that will promote affordable development. And that's something that we can do. So that was hopeful. That would include, for example, looking at changing bylaws that would make it easier for tiny homes to be built, for example. Look at something that we discovered in our research and our talking with folks, something called overlay districts, which is a way, right now when you have different districts, even a small town like Southampton has a quote business district and a rural district, how they
That's what happens when you come home.
Sorry about that.
It was very nice.
So much for the quiet.
Nice.
So, changing a district can be really hard, working through a planning board, expanding a district, but an overlay district is a mass law that makes that easier, because instead of changing what you have already, it literally allows a district to be designed to overlay what's already there. So you're not rewriting the whole books, in other words. And that, for me, has possibilities. Not philosophically, you can create an overlay district that permits a mixed development, that permits a commercial development with affordable housing that's on the second floor of that storefront kind of look. So some optimism there for me as far as things that we can do both in the short term, and then maybe, we've got more members now. We're not 3 anymore, we're 4. There's things we can look at as far as long term to improve the housing stock in the town of Southampton.
So just to also for Brian, and maybe he knows that Southampton Woods is federally supported, formerly known as Section 6 housing for seniors and disabled, right? So we have some affordable housing in town. It's just not, it's just federally wayfinders, supported by through wayfinders. So we're not really involved in it, but at least something does exist in town.
That's a really good point. And I know we're getting a little bit tangential here, but when I reported before the select board, I stated that this was before COVID, but it's recorded somewhere. I stated that we had 0 units in town for affordable housing. That's technically true only in the sense that we have 0 owner-owned units in Southampton. We do have some rental units in town. However, the rental units, as I recollect, Janet, is anywhere between 2.5%, I think at best, to maybe 3% of our total housing stock, which doesn't even come close to the 10% that the state sets for a goal through Mass Chapter 60B?
40B.
40B, thank you.
Yeah, and the percentage is 1.9.
Yeah, I was going to say
1.9, okay.
High, but yeah, 1 point, that's pretty close then.
Yeah, so we're a long ways off from being exempt should a developer come into town and decide that they were going to build a bunch of units and they just need to include a minimum number of, as I understand it, 40B, a limited number of affordable units for that development to be able to do that regardless of any zoning, because we don't meet the 10% floor that the state sets as a goal. So we've got some work to do.
And I would point out that at the moment there is land on the market in Southampton, and it is very possible that a developer could decide to do that. So it's something that could happen at any time.
Right. And, from my perspective, as a housing authority that's trying to expand the stock of affordable housing, it would certainly do that. I think the incentive is, rather than the town having a voice in, where that additional housing may go by reaching the 10%, you don't have a voice. And Brian, to share with you, one of the reasons why it probably doesn't happen is because Southampton does lack infrastructure for large developments. There's no sewer, essentially. The members of this board have been puzzled by, there are some large, on College Highway, some large apartment units. They must have a super septic there that manages it all. But when you build units, if you have to build for a super septic, I would imagine that adds to your costs as a builder, which probably disincentivizes that kind of development in town, or else maybe we would see more. I don't know.
Does anybody happen to know what the CPA dollar amount is right now that's can be used for affordable housing?
Well, I can tell you from town hall meeting on Saturday that it's over $400,000. There's it's not, that CPA money doesn't necessarily mean it's all guaranteed for affordable housing. There's other means for CPA funds. We'd have to request it, et cetera. But we have that's another.
The last community preservation meeting when I went to, which was a long time ago, there was a good chunk of money in the housing authority, in the housing section of that budget, because I'm actually on that committee, or at least on that committee. But I think it's like I think you're right. I think about 450,000, if I remember right.
That is one of our assets. We have a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
Right, and it sounds like it might be enough to build a super septic system. So is that something that is feasible if a developer could be enticed with an offer like that?
Or it would be enough to buy some property and then donate it to the developer to build affordable housing.
Yeah, that's. Yeah.
However way we could approach it, I don't know.
Right.
Because they always say that there's not enough money in affordable housing to make any money for them to build, but that may just be an excuse too. So
Right, and I recollect from a previous member, I don't think we have carte blanche to take that money and just give it to a developer in anywhere. I think there's certain things that we can assist with. So, for example, my understanding, when you build affordable housing as a builder, you have to supply all the appliances. Fridge, stove, which generally happens anyway, but those are the kind of things that the housing authority could buy for the builder. I think the land too, and that's one of the things we've looked at also, Brian, was one of our goals in our exploration was, we were all going to go to the town hall, look at maps and figure out what land is available in town, and what land maybe doesn't meet a building code requirement because there's, for example, insufficient frontage per bylaw, but we could seek an override to get affordable housing built there.
Right, and you could also work with the planning board to change that bylaw, I would imagine.
Yes, that's one of the areas where we hope to, work with the planning board on an overlay district, work with the planning board on creating, maybe through an overlay district, a part of town that would allow smaller lot sizes, essentially, which, to catch you up, something that, I hope to increase the housing stock of affordable housing in town. I think I shared with this with you, Brian, when we had coffee. I want to certainly create affordable housing as it's defined by HUD, but I also want to create more housing stock just along that full continuum, which would include some smaller, more reasonably priced homes that aren't necessarily, they may not meet the demands that HUD puts for the 80% AMI, but they're not a $500,000 home on 5 acres either. And that, to me, is just a matter of giving the developer an opportunity to have a smaller lot size, and they can make more units, smaller units. I've shared with this committee in the past, there's some nice homes. I lived in one of them across from Paisanos. There's a little neighborhood back there with small ranch homes. That's where I lived. Mountain View Circle's another street I think about, which has some nice homes on smaller lots that, if I'm not mistaken, with today's code requirements, I don't think you could build those homes today.
Right, and several of them are for sale right now.
Mm-hmm. I have found that those homes sell, everything's selling fast now, but affordable homes like that in Southampton sell very quickly. And there's a high demand, so they frankly probably sell at a high end for a comp of a home with that square footage and that size yard. Because people want to be in Southampton. It's a good school system, et cetera. So, philosophically, one of the things this committee has talked about in the past is making sure that we do not witness the gentrification of Southampton, where in addition to making sure we have housing that's on the affordable end for all citizens, both in and out of town. But we make sure we have housing that meets the needs of the people who serve us, our teachers, our janitors, our police, our fire. And when I think of, again, I go back to Mountain View Circle, I think of, if you're someone just starting off as a police officer, for example, you're not making a lot of money. And if you have a family, it's going to be hard to find a home in Southampton to live. So I'm going to be quiet because I've been doing all the talking. I'm just curious if Chuck and Janet want to add further to that kind of very long summary of what we've been doing the last year and a half or 2 years.
I think my vision is to have something, find some property where we can have a mix of open space and affordable housing or starter home type of housing. So we keep the look and feel of the town and not make it objectionable by, anybody that's, that could, people will object regardless of whatever we do, but and so that's one of my things. And somebody mentioned someplace up on Gilbert Road that is property that's owned by the town. I don't know how much. I have to look into it. Somebody just happened to mention it the other day. What about the property on Gilbert Road that the town owns? Because if we could get
Who knew?
Property, pardon me?
I said, who knew?
Who knew? Yeah. So I need to look into that a little bit more because it was just like a few days ago that somebody mentioned it. And I can certainly ask Martha from the assessor's office what the property is and to get us some dimensions and things like that. But if we have property that's owned by the town, whether it's behind the fire department up there, or if it's, that little lot across from the town hall, or if there's something up on Gilbert Road, or, where we can get a start and then work with a developer that really can put something, whether it's tiny homes or whether it's, or I know what one of the things Chris Lee mentioned in tiny houses was some of the farmland that people want to stay in their main home, but they can't really, they're not farming anymore, so there are places that he's worked with that these people are, having tiny houses built on their farmland and then selling them so they can afford to stay in their farmhouse and pay the taxes in Southampton, but also have some, income when they sell those tiny houses.
They either sell them or they rent them out, or sometimes live in them themselves because they're one story and et cetera, and rent out the farmhouse.
Right.
Tiny homes are great for multi-generational situation where you have a senior who lives in the home and you maybe have some kids who are living in the home also, but their family's growing, and so they need more room, and the senior wants their space and wants to stay in town. It's a nice fit. And the tiny home that Chris put over in Easthampton there was not a farm. It was a pretty small lot. So these tiny homes are not, I think, to kind of summarize what Chuck said, they surprised us in that they're not the tool shed dressed up. They're decent size, but they fit.
It's funny. Initially, I thought tiny home. I thought it was just one little, like a trailer. But when he actually presented the video, I actually looked at the video, and I was a little surprised at how big it is. It's actually just like basically a 1-bedroom kind of house with a 1-bedroom, living room, kitchen, and it's on one slab.
Yep. Yeah. And so this, people, I guess what we're all saying, I feel, is that there's a multi-pronged approach to trying to create more affordable housing in Southampton. Tiny homes is one. Coming up with some new districting or an overlay district that allows a zoning for smaller lots or whatever is another. pursuing town-owned land is yet another. Maybe going back to PVPC and getting serious about, okay, help us do what Goshen did. I think there's opportunities. It's where I feel limited, and I'm sorry, I need your help, is I think we can do some of these simultaneously, but I also feel a little bit disjointed. Like there's all of that. Where do we start? How do we prioritize?
And the comment about Goshen, though, I think that kind of backfired on the town itself, is that not that many people that were residents qualified. And so a lot of the houses or condos or whatever went to people from outside of town. And I think they got some negative responses to that initiative, which is, because the guidelines are very strict and
Right.
for affordable housing. So,
Right.
we can't, it's setting expectations too. If you build affordable housing, that it's not necessarily going to be filled with people from Southampton that need a
Right.
place to live, so.
Once you involve a federal program, you cannot select. And I think I feel we need to recognize that that's okay, in that obviously we want to help our own citizens in town. That's our charge, but we want to create more affordable units so that people who want to live here can. So that's one of those, for me, one of those goals, to create more affordable units for people in town. Like you said, Jen, sometimes it kind of butts head with once we start taking a federal program, you run that risk. That is what happened in Goshen.
And it's setting the expectation, I think that, which is.
I think that's what it's all about, education, and us as members of this board prepared to educate towns members about what we're trying to do. And again, that's why I feel a multi-pronged approach isn't a bad idea, because we can try to fulfill all these goals through different avenues.
So Jim, are you saying that we couldn't buy property and then give it to a builder to do, if we had a contract with them to build affordable housing? Is that one of the things that can't be done?
Well, I think, one of the things that was tried in the past and failed repeatedly before my time, this is what I learned from the previous members, is to buy land privately. So the previous iteration of this housing authority had some money too, like we do, because it keeps building up. And they were tracking, lots for sale, and they would find a lot, it was reasonable. They would run to try to, get the money from the CPA, et cetera. By the time they did all that, the lot always sold ahead of them.
Right.
They just couldn't. They didn't have a trust fund, and they didn't have the flexibility to make those kind of purchases. And the market is bearing strong now too. So you're spending a lot of money for maybe not much buck. That was one of the struggles that we learned, Janet, is, not having a paid housing authority and a full running staff like that. It was a volunteer basis. Trying to chase the real estate market was a fool's errand, it turned out in the end. They never could do it in time. Either a private citizen or some developer bought the lot ahead of them before they could. So that's why we considered, looking at town maps, looking at current town-owned property, and seeing, why is it sitting there? To your point earlier, Jan, the piece up on top of the fire station, whatever, is that just being held, or what's available? I'm hoping we can find something that, for whatever reason, doesn't meet code for frontage or whatever, and then, convince the town, let's do an override here for this piece of land so we can put something there. The owner will pay taxes, which is better than what they're getting now, which is nothing. So yeah, there's there are many barriers to cross.
So I think of this house on East Street that is pretty dilapidated, and I'm like, it's not moving on the market, or there's a 2-family one on East Street. I don't know what the price is on them, but yeah, by the time, if we were to say, well, if we got the right contractor, could they convert this one house into, affordable units? And how much money would be involved in that? And also, if they could do it affordably.
Right. So this is again, it's not my intent to sound like negative Nancy, because I don't want to be this way. I'm just going to report what I know, my frustrations. But, minus a housing trust that's administered, the town doesn't necessarily want to be responsible for buying something and then essentially buying the responsibility that goes with it. So now you're the owner, you have to get insured until it gets developed and all that stuff that goes with ownership. And generally towns that successfully do this, have a housing trust, and that's how they manage this. Somebody managed it. But then, see, now we're going back to what I was expressing earlier, the frustration, these larger towns have a paid staff, someone who knows what they're doing. As chair of the Southampton Housing Authority, I feel a sense of responsibility and frankly, a little fear and trepidation around. I don't feel, I know I'm not competent to manage a trust, and I don't want that responsibility, frankly. I don't know how to do it. We could perhaps explore to see if a small town does how, maybe I and the rest of us can learn. But I'm not comfortable at this point saying, let's start a housing trust and we'll administer it.
Right.
I have no idea what that means. And if you start talking about money and it's public money that you're handling, I find that frankly very intimidating. So a lot to learn there. So that's another thing that limits exactly what you're describing. They did try, you talk about East Street, Janet. If you're all familiar with East Street and you're familiar with the entrance to the Edwards Library,
Yeah.
if you visualize that, there is a house that it's closest to that entrance, and it's like
Blue.
Blue, yep, dark
blue house.
blue, like slate blue
Yep.
house.
Yep.
So that house was on the market for a while, and the housing authority did try to move on that and was actually working with Wally Merrick, a local developer, to see, hey, we could do something with this house. But it didn't happen, and someone bought it. A developer bought it quickly and quickly made it into a duplex.
Yeah.
That's what we'd like to do, but make it affordable. But we couldn't even act in time, even if we had a trust. So we have a lot of barriers to what we're trying to do here. One of which is Southampton is a town where people want to live. And so there's demand for housing. And there's demand for housing that can be built and sold at a profit. So, that's a perfect example. You talk about that East Street property. It's a modest home. The developer didn't put a huge, again, 3,000 square foot home there. They just took what they had, fixed it up nice, but made it into a small duplex and made their money. So how do we replicate that as a housing authority that meets voluntarily, monthly? Sure, we could do. If we met every week, would that make a difference? Again, expressing a little of my frustration, and that's not with you folks, believe me, it's with myself. I just feel a little bit handicapped, and which is why, again, I've kind of navigated toward more let's work with the planning board. Let's look at zoning changes. Let's look at an overlay district. Because I feel, well, that's kind of more realistically in our wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I don't want to forget those other goals though, because to Brian's point, we've got a big chunk of money that we can use. How can we use that money? I don't want to just spend it because we can spend it, but that's an envy of other small towns housing authorities. We've got some leverage there. How do we make that work?
Especially, in order to get approval for the CPA funds, we'd have to go to a town meeting,
Yep.
which,
Yeah. We don't have the authority to just say, spend it.
right. And we've done that with open space. We were able to have a pretty fast, unique town meeting for almost just that. But that was when we weren't dealing with COVID, and now having a unique town meeting is a little bit more challenging even than.
Well, even if there's a house on the market and you have to go to, you get to community preservation and say, okay, I want to get this house. Then we got to bring it to town meeting. By the time we get to town meeting, by the time we get moving on any of that, get the house, it's 3 to 6 months. And by that point, the house is probably gone.
Right. And I think, Chuck, if we had a housing trust that was managed, we could skip the town meeting part, because the trust would be set up to do just that. There would have to be a town meeting, I believe, to warrant and to approve the creation of a trust and a management of a trust. Yeah. But once that was established, then we could move a little faster there. But again, the whole trust thing again, I don't feel qualified to manage that trust. It's not right now.
And if I remember when we met with Amherst, that it was a different board that ran the trust than the housing authority. So it's not even the same people. So
probably separated by design, to maintain a sense of independence and a self-correcting auditing trail or whatever. So, that said, I feel there's things that we can affect as a housing authority right now. We can, I believe, I'll use my I statements, I believe that we can, begin initiation talks with the planning board and have some public meetings about that. I think longer term, looking at a trust, you talk about, special, or even getting on the docket for a town meeting about an item we want to change or add. That we can do too, but that's a bigger lift and a longer term thing, I believe, or in my opinion. And again, it's not my job or my desire to be negative Nancy, but I'll share with you folks, I'll give you a little hint, the results of the Master Plan Implementation Committee town survey will be coming out shortly. But as a member of that committee, I've had privy to some of the data, and in short, there is a strong desire in this town for open space. You brought up that example, Janet. Unfortunately, there's no similar mandate for housing, for affordable housing.
So the survey didn't show a desire to bring more affordable housing into town.
No, and it didn't. Surprisingly, there was not so much desire to support even senior housing in town. And then there was a specific question about tiny homes, which was panned. That doesn't mean I think the survey was really robust. The survey, the number of responses was way beyond expectations. So I think the data is valid, but I feel that if the survey says something contrary to what we're trying to accomplish, it doesn't mean it negates what we're trying to accomplish. I think what it means is, as a board, we have some education to provide the town. We've got some work to do. Because it was a little bit contradictory, the data, in that there was some interest in, senior housing, for example, more affordable housing in town. But then there was no desire, for example, to create a district with smaller lots. Strong opposition, in fact. So it's kind of contradictory. You can't have more affordable housing on a big lot. It's just the economics doesn't work. So there's some I feel there's going to be an educational effort involved. But more of that to come, and we can dig into that data when it becomes public.
So when you talk about meeting with the planning board to make zoning changes, what kind of zoning changes would we request, I guess?
I suggest we start with, the low-lying fruit, and we start with something that's easier to implement, which would be an overlay district, probably along the major corridors of town where smaller lot sizes, not 140 feet frontage, but less, would be permitted. That doesn't necessarily create affordable housing units, but it gives the opportunity should a developer choose. Right now, that's not even an option.
So I'm just curious, and I don't mean to keep asking questions. Please, anybody else?
No, that's what this is all about.
Then,
All learning.
the folks that bought the property next to what's now going to be a church made some comment at a town meeting, or not a town meeting, at a select board meeting, that, if they didn't get their Dunkin' Donut, then they'd put in affordable housing, of which I said, that's great, we need it.
Yes,
Probably wasn't the answer they wanted to hear. That's wonderful.
It was phrased as a threat, but not to us.
Yes, and so I'm sure everybody else in town was like, what is she talking about? But I wonder, because they've never come back to the select board. And I'm just wondering if it's somebody that we could work with,
Well,
if they would be serious about, then how could we work with them to make it very presentable in town and very fitting in, and you got two lots there, two separate building lots. I'm just curious if we know them and if they would be interested in, were they just kidding, or he made the comment, and certainly the Dunkin' Donuts, I think they're building one down on East Street in near Route 5 in Easthampton. And I don't know if they're doing this in love. I'm just curious if they would be, and could we help them somehow, and can we help mold a vision that's acceptable and palatable, and everybody but Bob Kobsa, maybe, who lives next door, close by or something. But I don't think we want it to be, if we could control it somehow by supporting them somehow. I don't know what they're doing, so I'm just, and it may have been just a threat, and maybe there's no way they're going to do that, but.
Well, right, we could, I don't even know who the prospective buyer was.
The people that own, it's American somebody that owns the Dunkin' Donut franchise, I think, in the area. I mean, certainly on the record, probably at one of the select board meetings.
Right.
Or board.
So that's certainly an option to pursue. But I don't think Massachusetts 40B allows a developer to come in and put in a retail establishment, and they can do it because they included affordable housing. I could be wrong.
No, I'm not talking about a retail establishment.
So instead of,
Yes, instead of,
I see. Because that's another objective I'd like to see in an overlay district is, allowing for mixed use development.
Right, but if we could get a bylaw change, and they could put maybe 3 units there and have some green space there, and, and still, so they could put 3 houses in instead of 2 houses, or I'm just brainstorming,
Right, but we wouldn't be talking about the developer of Dunkin' Donuts then, because that would.
No, he's the one who said, well, if we can't do Dunkin' Donuts, then we'll do this. So we'll get somebody to build that in lieu of Dunkin' Donuts. Yeah, I'm not supporting the Dunkin' Donuts in that location. I'm saying if he said, well, if we can't do Dunkin' Donuts, we'll do affordable. Well, how do we?
Right. So who's he, the seller or the Dunkin' Donuts person said this?
What do you mean the seller? I mean,
Seller of the land?
the franchise owner
Right, okay.
property is still the Dunkin' Donut person, but he said, we're going to build something. We're going to use the land for something. They spent, what, 2.25 or something. They're not
I
going to.
didn't know that they bought it. I thought that was.
Oh, yeah, they bought it. They owned it.
They own.
Bought it. Yes.
I didn't know that.
They bought it.
So they were looking for an override to
rezone, to get it rezoned.
They
And
could be just bringing it back to town meeting again to get it, bring it back
Right.
up, bring it to Dunkin' Donuts again.
but it's been 2 or 3 town meetings. They haven't come back with it.
Yeah, but I don't know.
So I think it's worth pursuing only because I didn't realize they owned it. I thought that was, contingent on buying it if they could get what they want. That's kind of a leap on their part to buy it.
I think, yes.
I need to go into the other room and plug in my computer, so bear with me while I move away.
All right.
So anyway, I just, I don't know what their plans are with the land, but maybe we could just ask,
Sure, we could.
because I certainly don't want affordable housing in there that is an eyesore. We want it to fit in, especially so close to the historic district.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't know. I'm sorry, Chuck. I think I cut you off. Sorry.
No, I was taking what they were saying. Well, we're just going to put affordable housing there is just to say, if you don't put Dunkin' Donuts in, we're putting affordable housing as sort of
Right.
I won't say threat, but just a,
Spiteful.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was my
So-
impression.
But we don't know that. We're making those assumptions.
Right.
And I think that may have been the case, but I mean, doesn't hurt, never hurts to ask, I guess.
Certainly does not. Does not. So, is that, are you willing to explore that avenue, Janet? Find out the person, contact them and.
I can try to, track them down and see if I probably can pull the names from the select board meeting minutes.
Mm-hmm.
If I can go through the select board, figure out because it was before the January town meeting, because it was supposed to be on that, and I think they pulled it off of that meeting or the special town meeting, and then I think people thought it would come back on the annual town meeting, and or maybe it was a fall meeting. I'd have to go back and do the check the meeting the warrants for town meetings and see where it appeared, and then they pulled it off of the warrant at the last minute. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we have.
Can't hurt to ask.
No, we have
Oh,
one.
no.
We have one action item from this meeting so far, and that's a good thing.
And maybe they do want to put a affordable housing there. I mean, might not be bad to ask them, and maybe they change their mind. Maybe they're reevaluating what they want to do. Who knows?
They haven't come back to get the Dunkin' Donuts approved, so I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. They may tell me you're crazy, but
Well,
maybe
then you know.
but then
Assume nothing.
who told you that I'm crazy? No.
Mm-hmm.
A stupid question is never asked.
Right. So I'm going to bring us back to the agenda under next steps. Before we get to CARES Act, since we're kind of discussing a little bit about prioritizing our next steps, or I sense we are, I laid it out a little bit in this agenda. It wasn't meant to be predetermination by any stretch. It was just kind of a thought dump on my part. But you can see under next steps, there's 3 sub-bullets. We'll skip, if we could, please, the first one for now, the CARES Act, and just jump to, there's planning board collaboration, which you talked about. And then I put under future exploration, kind of more longer term things. What do folks think? Like, for example, we could, assign folks to, for example, visit Westhampton Woods and kind of check it out and see if there's somebody there we could talk to. How'd you guys do this? What were the barriers? What worked?
I mean, didn't we talk to Hilltown Consortium or whatever they're called? And they're the ones that really drove that.
And I recollect, Janet, that they said, yeah, this was actually, which surprised us. That's when we learned it was a private development.
Right. So unless we get a private, I mean, I'm not sure what questions we don't have answered yet, I guess is my question.
Well, it could be my feeble brain not recalling, but I mean, is it worth pursuing a private development in town here? Because when we say that was privately developed, it wasn't developed with any CPA funds, or it's not HUD. So it's not necessarily affordable, but if they're smaller units, it's more on the, if you again go back to the continuum, it's probably more on the desirable end for limited income seniors, for example. I don't sense that Westhampton Woods, I know it's not one of these 55 plus communities like Pomeroy, whatever it is, right near the school.
I don't know that that's 55 plus either. I don't think it's officially.
Oh, I thought it was. Well,
22 Primary Meadow. I don't believe so.
Okay. But if we're talking about senior housing, there's plenty of 55 plus communities, but they're market rate, and the market for those is high. And Westhampton Woods, I'm nearly certain, has some design with units that are more in the price range that people might be able to live with. So how did that happen? Do we go back to do we talk to that consortium you're talking about, and is it worth exploring?
Well, can I just ask the history of the Hilltown Consortium and Southampton not being involved? Was that a choice by the town, or were we not invited?
Well, we're not a hill town, I guess. We're just not a hill town, so I don't know. We got left out, I think.
It feels like it's something that even if we're not technically a hill town, they might be able to help us with. They might be able to even just throw a consultant our way every now and then.
Yeah, we met with somebody from there too. It's the Hilltown Community Development Corporation is the name of it.
Oh, that's right. Hilltown CDC.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they did say that they could work with us now, as I recollect.
Yeah, I think he could find a way to do it. It's not that they wouldn't do it. It's that we're not initially a hill town, and
right.
We're not a member. But that brings up another issue, Brian, that we struggle with. And Southampton is not a hill town. We're not as small as Worthington or Chesterfield, but we're not Easthampton or Northampton either. We're kind of this hybrid in the middle. So it's hard to kind of align. We're not big enough to really have a robust, frankly, paid housing authority. But we're not tiny, hill town either. We have some resources, and we don't even, the hill towners we're flatlanders, people up in the Berkshires, they don't have it against us, but we're not generally, other than the school district allows, they don't even consider us, to Janet's point. But there could be an alignment there, to your point. I think maybe pushing that envelope a little bit, or going back to the Hilltown CDC and kicking that tire again.
Well, how about the Valley CDC, the one in Northampton? I believe there's a relationship with them.
We don't, but we could look at that too. That's a great example of how we're kind of neither. But because
that's
maybe
what I was referring to, don't fall into, nobody wants us.
Right, but it's mostly not that, we're just not noticed, but maybe if we actively seek them out, and we might find Valley CDC more in line with what we're doing here as far as size and potential than Hilltown CDC. Because again, we do have assets. We've got quite a pool of money in that CPA.
Yeah, I'd be happy to reach out to somebody at Valley CDC and Hilltown CDC and see if we can at least start a conversation about, maybe they have people who know what an overlay district proposal is supposed to look like, and they can help us craft one. Who knows? Maybe they can do something minor and technical for us, or maybe it could flourish into something that gets the subsidized housing inventory up from 1.9%. It could be any number of things they could do for us. So let's see.
I love it. Let's maybe, these consortiums, they're like the old county government organizations where, there's a membership quote fee or whatever, but you get benefits out of it too. And that's something we could look at, how, if we spend CPA money on something like that, becoming part of a consortium, which helps drive our goals. That would be, I'd be curious if you could ask them that too. How do they have membership? How does it work?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'd point out that if the town demonstrates that they are moving towards the 10% goal, then 40B doesn't apply in the meantime. It's sort of held at bay because we're making a good faith effort. So if the town could build, could add 1% a year until it gets to 10%, then we're protected from 40B as well.
Thank you. That is obviously, valid point, but also salient to what we're talking about, because it's not like it's the threshold or nothing. The effort counts, thankfully. Yeah. Another thing, something I'm willing to do, speaking of next steps, is reach out to Paul Demon, who's the chair of the planning board, and say, we're interested in collaborating with you on overlay districts, bylaw rewrites, exclusions, as far as, if the town owns lot size. How do we meet? Can we meet collaboratively? Can our committee meet with yours in one Zoom? I'm happy to do that outreach to see if we can't push that also.
So Brian's going to reach out to Valley CDC?
Yep, and I'll do the Hilltown CDC just to see if they have a membership system or any benefits we could get for a fee, and then report that back.
Okay, and we have a gentleman's name that's in the minutes somewhere that we met with last year and a half. So
that's why I can't remember. I can't remember what I had for breakfast. But you're right. It's in the minutes. If you do a little digging, this is where your journalism background is going to play.
Investigative journalism here.
Yes.
I'm on the case.
And I know enough to say hello to the executive director of Hilltown CDC, Dave Christofelis. But I think the person we met with is probably more directly in line with the whole housing piece of it. I guess, if worst case scenario, we just, for some reason, can't make a connection to this individual, or he's giving you the stiff arm, I could reach out to Dave and see. So just, keep me in the loop.
Sure.
All right. So I will reach out to Paul. Oh.
Scared me?
Yes.
I'm looking through the names and I don't. Doug, was it his name Doug? No. Charlie Hayes. I'm just looking to see at the names of the folks online. Paul Laschetti.
Paul Laschetti?
Is the guy we met with from Hilltown.
Okay, great. Then I'll reach out.
He's the housing director.
Perfect.
So.
Do you have the spelling of his last name there?
I do. Lischetti.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Nice job, Janet. I think we've got a cub reporter here in the making.
See, this is what my life dream was, to be a cub reporter. So.
There you go. It's never too late.
I have to stop volunteering in town.
Gonna get you one of those fedoras with the little tag that says press. Nice. And again, I'll reach out to Paul. I appreciate the enthusiasm on this team. What other, just looking at the agenda.
Yep.
Oh, we do need to, well, we'll stick with next action steps before I go to CARES Act.
I'm
because
going
there
to talk
could
to
be-
planning board.
Yeah. If there are no other present next steps, I'd like to propose another one. So on the agenda, there's the CARES Act funding. So I saw this article in the paper, but I think the town of Hadley had some CPA funds, and so they were going to use their CPA funds to help town residents who were struggling because of unemployment with meeting their rental or mortgage needs. And the cool thing about it, and this is what I loved about it the most, is they were going to have a certain amount of funds, and they were going to let Community Action, which is a local human service agency, administer this. That's apparently permissible. So like us, Hadley's a small town. They probably don't have a paid board. They weren't going to be having to actually handle the money, write checks to the banks, write checks to the landlords or whatever. They were just, they could take this pot of money and say, here, Community Action, you administer this program for us, which I thought that's really, really cool. And something that we could do. We do have a good pot of money. I'm sure there are people in town who are really sweating out this pandemic. And that would be, I think, very much in line with what we're trying to do, make housing affordable. We can prevent homelessness. The caveat to this is I since learned that I think in my opinion, we should pursue this, but there's already funds available. There's something called Raft Funds, which is residential assistance, I forget, RAFT. There's different funds from the state out there that help, that agencies are administering, that help people with this. So that doesn't mean we shouldn't pursue this, because there's probably people who fall through the cracks, or Raft funding, for example, is limited. Raft is for renters assistance. And then there's an URBA or something, which is for people who help them with their mortgage. There's state programs, I guess what I'm saying. And those programs are usually strapped for cash, but they too got CARES Act funding. Mm-hmm. So they actually have the means to help folks. But, and speaking mostly from ignorance, there could still be folks in need who fall through the cracks, or who maybe just barely don't qualify, that help from the town could make a difference. So I think that's something that this town and this housing authority should pursue. And especially if we work with, for example, Community Action, and we tell them, look, the way we want this administered is, with the administration comes some counseling for people in need, and you help them find Raft funding or URBA funding first, and then help with the town monies if needed.
So Jim, can I ask a couple questions?
Yes, this is just Jim talking in a proposal. It's not a mandate, believe me.
So my question is, how do we define those people? How do we find those people? How do we get approval to use CPA funds for that without a town meeting? Those are kind of my first three questions. And then why would we not require COVID funds from the CARES Act from town itself for this? And how would we determine that as well? Same questions, kind of.
So those are three good questions. The first one, how do we find these folks? Sometimes, and I need to go in and check our mailbox. Sometimes we actually get letters from townspeople looking for help. Mm-hmm. That would be one way. But mostly people in this situation are they're not going to their local housing authorities. They're going out on this mass.gov. They're looking it up themselves. They're getting help from neighbors. They're getting help from their therapist or their counselor. They might, if they're SNAP recipients, for example, they have a SNAP, counselor who will direct them to housing assistance. So they're not going to come to us. They're going to be townspeople looking for help, already probably pursuing, for example, Raft funding. But this would permit, again, the townspeople to have something maybe in addition to that, above and beyond, if they need it, or if they just quite don't meet criteria. And that's where it being administered by an agency that does this as part of their mission, like Community Action, they would put bulletins out there to people who provide services for folks who are struggling economically during these times. Hey, here's a new resource. If you're working with someone who lives in Southampton, they've just dedicated some CPA funds, kind of thing. So I think the finding them wouldn't be us. It would be the agencies who do this already. We'd essentially be offering a new and additional resource for those agencies that provide these services for folks who are struggling. That's my opinion. I believe that's how it would work. Do we need a town meeting to do this? Great question. We could talk to Hadley and find out how they did it. Is what's required. Does every time we spend CPA money, does it have to go before a town meeting?
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, I think that
housing's different, but sorry, Brian.
No, please. I think that would be a great opportunity to talk to the public, especially if we can make it clear that this is an urgent need and we want to do it quickly. I think that if we have too many meetings about this subject, the need will pass. So maybe it would be beneficial to, try to put something up in the next 2 months instead of 6 or something like that. And we could use the time wisely to spread the word among our community members that, this is worth going to town meeting and voting for.
And is there COVID? Could we request some COVID funding to do it, and how much would we request?
Right. That's true. We don't have any idea. So I might have an answer for that. I also know, well enough to say hello to the executive director of Community Action, Ms. Claire Higgins.
Oh,
okay. I'm happy to reach out to her and say, hi there. I see that you just, were awarded the contract, if you want, to administer for Hadley. Can we talk? And I can pick her brain. How did that happen? What kind of amount did they get? What did Hadley have to go through to make this happen? She'll probably have some good answers for me.
Did you speak to Ed at all about the CARES funds?
I did not. Yeah.
Because our requests have to be in, I think, this week. They're going to make it, they have to be to the state by the end of the month. So if we're going to use any care funds. So.
Well, I take it back. I told him that we would like to have some CARES funds. And he said, great, I'll put you on the list. So he didn't ask for an amount, but he knows that the Housing Authority would like to have care funds.
Was that a written communication or a verbal one? Yes. Okay.
It's an email. So I did do that much. But the details, back to your question, Janet, whether we're talking about, CPA funds to subsidize rents or mortgage, or making sure as a housing authority that we make sure CARES Act funding is available for that. How much should we ask for? I have no idea. I don't recall a figure put forth by the Hadley proposal, but I can ask that of Claire Higgins. How much did Hadley? That might give us, because none of us, or at least I don't, really knows what's a realistic number. 10,000, 50,000, 150,000, you know, I have no idea.
Well, 50,000 would help probably 45 people get 1 month of rent. So even though higher numbers are unattractive to taxpayers, higher numbers would be much more effective. You know, 500 grand is probably an unreasonable request, but you know, maybe ask for 150 and be happy when you get 60.
Or right, and also I don't know if you're implying this, Brian, but this pandemic isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
Certainly not. No.
We got at least another 6 months, 8 months, as I see it. And so, you know, I can't imagine what it's like if you're thinking, I can't afford this. I got to move my kids out of this apartment. I can't afford to stay here. So you're hopefully things are being patched together, Raft funding, maybe some CARES Act funding from the town, maybe CPA money from the town. So I don't think any one source is going to pay the whole rent. But nonetheless, you do want to have some funds out there.
Well, hopefully the CARES Act is not the only thing that happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So since Chuck is on the CPA or the CPC as our representative, wouldn't it make sense, Chuck, for you to speak to Virginia?
Yeah, I can talk to her about the additional money for maybe rental or something.
Well, how do we access what's required if we want to do something?
Do we have to have a town meeting? Yeah. What's the process?
How to access money?
Yeah.
Because they just had a meeting last week, I think, so.
All right.
Last Wednesday or whatever.
Did they do Zoom meetings?
Yep.
Okay. I'm sure about that.
Yeah, I think she was asking if we had made any changes or not during the meeting from housing.
No, I just haven't had a chance to have the meeting. And I wasn't sure on how to log on to it, but I'll figure it out. Okay.
You got on this one.
Well, I got on this one, but I have to go on the town website, and
No.
I've been having difficulties getting on the town website to get the link.
You too.
Yeah.
I've not been able to access the town website.
Yeah.
It's up now. It was down for a little while because they were going to a more secure HTTPS. And so then the old HTTP didn't work and blah, blah, blah. But it's usually posted on mytowngov. Mytowngovernment.org is usually where it's posted, like our agenda is usually posted there.
Right.
But I've tried getting on the town website numerous times.
Well, mytowngov is not the town website.
Yeah, but I'll try that. Okay.
So
And they only meet once a month. So you may want to just send her an email, Chuck, just to.
Yeah. Actually, it might be easier just to shoot her an email about how to access money.
Yeah, that's what I just said. Yeah.
right. Right. So I'm on the My Town Government website, and Janet, you're right. So I just clicked on our agenda, and there it is. Easy. But the Southampton website hasn't been working for me lately. Hopefully it is now.
Hopefully it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Because maybe there's a special thing during COVID with the CPA funds that make it more accessible, but
Right. Okay, so this I need to bring this back to we're a board, and we need to make sure that the board, we have at least a majority, if not consensus. So we've got some marching orders, but there's nothing in these marching orders that requires a vote that I can think of, because we're not committing any money yet. We're just exploring if if we can, and procedures and guesstimates to how much and et cetera. But again, being a chair of a committee like this is not something I have a lot of experience with. So I just want to make sure that I'm not undermining the democratic process, and I'm not undermining anyone on this board's opinions or desires or, your role, your voice, by not calling a vote. I don't see yet a reason to call a vote. For example, we're not saying we're going to do CARES Act funding. We're just we're putting it on the list for Ed to have. We're not saying we're going to take CPA funds and we're going to dedicate it toward rental subsidies run by a community agency. We're implying that, but until we know more details, we're not taking a vote. Is that a correct interpretation on my part?
Yes, I'd say so.
Yeah, I do too. And I just sent you Paul Lichetti's email, Brian.
Oh, great. Thank you.
That's a name. It's unique. Once you said it, I recollected, but I never would have remembered that.
Yep, here it is. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Well, it's only because I looked it up and my cap is on.
Okay. All right. So I appreciate you letting me go back a little bit backwards there and come back to the CARES Act. So based on my interpretation of the minutes or the agenda, other than setting a next meeting date and time, I think we've covered everything. Are there additional items, which should be an agenda item, additional items, things that we wish to cover today, questions we have?
I have one question. The email exchange or whatever type of exchange that I have with these representatives from the CDCs, is that a public document that I'm supposed to be handing to somebody at the town hall? Or is that just considered correspondence and I can report on it later? Do you happen to know?
I don't know firmly. I think not, but that's a good question. It's a good question.
Well, I'd be happy to share it with you folks, and if anybody from the public wants a copy of it, nothing to hide. But I don't know if I'm supposed to put it on file somewhere or anything of that nature.
I don't believe so. I don't believe so because it's not. We have to guard against any kind of out of committee meeting, and that would not be the case. You're fact finding, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not aware of any other committee in town when they exchange email looking for information that they have to publicize this. I mean, I'm going to email Claire Higgins from Community Action. I'll have those emails available if I'm proven wrong, but I'm not aware of a reporting requirement. And Brian, if you haven't completed the ethics training yet for the state, please do. But my recollection of when I went that, I don't recollect that kind of reporting.
Right. I don't recall either, but I'd much rather check. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's be safe. You know what? Let's take it a step further. I will email Lucy Dalton.
Okay, great.
And I'll ask her. I'll CC everybody. If there are any of these kind of reporting requirements. Fair enough.
I mean, I've certainly not in any of the committees I've ever been involved in that I've seen that kind of micromanagement. But once we discuss it at the meetings, if there's anything we want to attach as an extra document on MyTownGov or that is beyond what we discuss at the meeting, because it should be in the minutes, even though it's not, they're just summaries, they're not details. But I would be kind of surprised if any background searches need to be
right.
documented.
I would be surprised too, but I think it's better to be safe than not. Among my many anxieties of trying to chair this board with not a lot of knowledge, and especially process knowledge is just that I make an assumption, it's not necessary, and it is something that needs to happen. So I appreciate you bringing it up, Brian. And I will send an email to Lucy and CC everyone, and then we will all know if something's required.
We just won't comment
Right, no comment.
with everybody on the CC'd on it.
Right.
I'm sorry?
We just will not comment about her response based on the CC, so we're not deliberating or talking.
Correct. Right. Good. Good question. Other good questions, or even not so good questions that might come from my mouth.
I think we covered, honestly, since Mason, my head is spinning a bit, so I think, I don't know if I have any more room for anything else, but if you do, I know you mentioned something that's federal called URBA or something, so you had Raft and then you had another, if you could give me that information for the minutes so I can correctly, because I tried to find anything like that on.
Yeah,
search and-
I've got the acronym wrong, but I'll get it to you.
Yeah, if you could just for the minutes purposes.
Certainly.
Thank you.
All right. Still seeing no guests and seeing no further questions. I think we're done today. Is there a motion?
I think that we need to set, I'd like to make a motion.
Next date.
Date
God, yes.
for our next meeting.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's right on the agenda too. I should read my own agenda. I put it there so I wouldn't forget, Janet. So much for that. We should definitely set a team. So what works for folks? This is the third Monday. Do we meet next month? Or?
Can I, for discussion purposes, I think with so many action items, especially kind of pertinent ones about COVID, that if we wait a full month for our next meeting, that it's too long. That's my personal opinion at this moment with COVID needs kind of creeping up.
Agreed. Especially when we're talking about helping people with rental subsidies.
Right. So I guess, I guess I have one question is if Ed is submitting something, I'd like to just maybe make a motion that Jim is able to speak on behalf of the authority for requesting a dollar amount to Ed, because that's due, the deadline is the 31st, and I guess I don't want to miss an opportunity if we decide to do that. So I'd just like to make that motion. I don't know if anybody wants to second it.
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor?
And you want to?
Oh no, we have to do the call. So Kane, what do you say?
Can we? Is there any discussion first? That just because.
As far as
how the rest of the group feels about it, we have a motion in a second, but I just want to make sure that.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm forgetting my Robert's rules. I thought once you made a motion, you had to vote.
No, then you discuss and then you vote. So.
No, I'm comfortable with Jim representing the authority on that. That's fine.
I am too. It works good.
Kane, yay.
Kennedy, aye.
Steele, aye.
Sini, aye. All right, that's good sense.
Thank you.
Again, I will definitely reach out to Ed. I'm going to reach out to Claire Higgins tonight if I can. But Ed did tell me that he didn't necessarily need a dollar amount by the 31st. He just wanted, but I think it helps to give him a dollar amount, because how can he ask for a certain funds by the 31st if he doesn't know what he's asking for?
Yeah, because we have so much funding. Everybody's putting in a request. I think they're coming in this week, so there may not be anything left over.
Right.
And I think the select board's looking at it tomorrow. So I guess.
Well, to that point, you talk about a next meeting date. Should we meet in a week? The 26th?
Yeah, I'm not sure we'll have all the answers to all the questions we have out there, but is there a specific topic you mean for?
Well, since you gave me the authority to give Ed a number, that's what I was really worried about. Okay, so a month is too long, but a week is not enough time to get what we need. That's what I'm hearing.
That's one member's opinion.
Right. I'm hearing that. Other members?
I agree. I think a week is too short.
Okay.
I think 2 weeks, maybe 3, and that's it. No longer than 3.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm looking at either the 2nd or the 9th, and either one of those would be fine. The one comment I'll add is that 6 o'clock might be a little more realistic for me than 5:30 is. I don't know how other folks feel, or if there's enough time to make proper legal notification of that time. But if it could be 6 instead of 5:30, it would make it easier for me personally.
I'm okay with 6.
6 works for me. How about you, Jen?
Used to be 6. We can go back to 6.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. So we have.
I think it's on the website that we meet on some Monday. But I think people have not really looking at what we say under the Housing Authority. But if we're going to move it to 6, I'll see if it's there, and I'll see if Ed can change it. Just so.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course, it was like 2, but.
So we're saying November 2nd, which is 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, and I think that was our initial date to meet was the first Monday of the month.
I think so.
So that gets us kind of back on track.
Yeah. Although I'm not opposed to doing what we're doing here, as the need arises, we jump out of that traditional monthly meeting mode to whatever we need to do. Yeah.
I agree.
So the 2nd of November at 6 p.m. And hopefully by then I'll be able to actually schedule it in mytown.government. I still don't have the tab there, Janet. It's crazy.
Yeah, I was a little confused on who is going to do what. So just let me know if we need to. I can post it, and then you can fill in the agenda if you get the
permissions.
Did you say Lucy said yes? It was all set?
She said it was all set. I can take care of that, but it's not.
She's been, some of the election is really racking her brain,
Right.
Okay. All right.
I'll include that in my communications to her. All right, so we have a future date, November 2nd, 6 p.m.
And I'll just put a basic.
Yeah, you can post it if you don't mind, so it blocks it.
And put a basic agenda, and we can fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Great.
Good.
I'll try to get the minutes done by then.
Pressure's on. We could at a future meeting discuss whether, we have the professional journalist be the clerk or not, or if he's willing. You do a good job, Janet. No good deed goes unpunished.
I don't have a problem with doing it. I
Good.
was a clerk at the assessors meeting, ran over here, clerk for this meeting. So if I don't mix them up, we're in good shape.
Better person than me. All right. So now.
7:10.
Yes. So I entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Anyone second?
I'll second.
Second. Okay.
Kane, aye.
Packy, aye.
Deal, aye.
Sini, aye. This has been fun, folks. I'm excited about the new enthusiasm and new blood present with us. Brian has given us old farts some energy on this committee to get going and get some work done. So thank you for joining us. And
Me too, because I'm not one of those. I don't qualify.
that's right.
And don't forget to hit leave all.
Yes. And before we go, Brian, happy birthdays in order, you said, for this week?
Next, it's November 1st, actually, so the day right before our meeting.
That's right. I think we talked about this when we had coffee, because mine is this week.
Oh,
Happy
happy
birthday.
You got a good 25 years on you.
Yeah, I'll get there someday.
Yeah. Take your time getting there.
God willing, right?
Yeah, kidding.
So. All right.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
All
Take
right.
care, folks.
Bye-bye.